Yeah, sorry.
I thought I might start speaking with that. Does anybody? Yes. Lots of questions. Yes.
Thank you. Dick Cheney has said quite boastfully that torture works and it's saved thousands of lives. And both of you said today that torture works. And our question, what do you mean by that? That it works? And can you cite any specific incident, verifiable incident, where torture has actually saved lives?
I can. The last time the UK had its torture problem was in Northern Ireland, and we banned the so-called five techniques in March 1972. Although we continued to abuse detainees after that point, but we just didn't use these five techniques, including stress positions, sleep deprivation, drinking water deprivation, and loud noise. Ministers at that time, around just shortly before the ban, were actually quite candid about what we were doing. It was more of an American approach, not boastful, but and Reginald Morley, who was the Home Secretary, stood up in the House of Commons in November 1971 on Brunt's Hansard, and he said, look, it works. This works. He said, this is what Morley said in November 1971. The principles applied in the interrogation of suspects in Northern Ireland and the methods employed are the same as those that have been used in other struggles against armed terrorists in which Britain has been involved in recent years. So he's saying, we've done it in the past, and it works. Now, Morgan would have been right, of course, because he would have seen the intelligence that was coming out of these interrogations. He would have known how many, and he says here somewhere, we got a lot of guns as a result of this. He said, the interrogation of which we were talking, resulted in the obtaining by the security forces of information about the IRA, its activities, its command structure, and its arms on a very large scale. And I think that's a good thing, that people should know where these arms are and who these men are who are killing civilians. How many arms did the IRA have in November 1971? Not a huge amount, I would have thought. So he's probably talking about a few handguns, shotguns, maybe a kid's machine gun or whatever. So in a sense, Morgan was right, that those interrogations did work. And he would have known it was right because he would have been privy to the intelligence. But what Morgan couldn't have known in November 71 was that the troubles were going to continue for another 30 years. 3,500 people were going to die, tens of thousands of lives were going to be ruined, and that countless billions of pounds worth of damage was going to be caused. And that happened in part, how large a part is debatable, but it carried on for another 30 years, in part because of the way the British Army was conducting its counterinsurgency operations in the early days. So that's, so yes, it worked, but it was terribly counterproductive.
Very interestingly, I gave a talk a bit like this, and a woman came up to me at the end and said, I was in the Irish Republican Army, I was in there from the beginning, and I've got to tell you that the stuff that you guys did to us was manna from heaven, because we could go around and say these people are animals.
Martyrdom is very effective.
It's a very good tool.
Because it's a real one. I mean, martyrdom is actually real.
But I mean, sorry.
So I can give you a very specific example as well. I know a former member of the IRA who in 1977 was arrested for the murder the previous year of a postman. The postman had been shot dead because he was a part-time member of the British Army. The person I know was the killer. He was guilty. He was sentenced to life after he was subjected to really quite sophisticated torture techniques. These police officers would twist his limbs in a way and hold him in a twisted position for about 2 hours, and he'd pass out. And he was given some respite. He was only given respite as long as he did press-ups and sit-ups. And as soon as he was exhausted by that, they started. So he made various admissions. He was convicted, and he was jailed for life. By the time he came out, he renounced violence, and he's now trying very hard to lead a very helpful life. So the torture of this man worked. He made an admission that led to him being taken off the streets. He was off the street for 16 years. By the time he came out, he didn't want to get involved in violence at all. So in a sense it worked. But the last time I spoke to him, we discussed this whole matter. And he said, look, you have to bear in mind, people didn't just join the IRA to fight for the United Ireland. They joined the IRA because they wanted to fight what they saw as being an abusive British state that was locking people up without trial, shooting on army testers, and torturing people. People joined the IRA because their neighbours were being tortured. And he said, it's very articulate individual, Tony, and he said, torture creates reservoirs of hatred and detestation that don't go away for years, and don't go away for generations. And he was saying that in relation to Britain's current counter-terrorism initiatives regarding Al-Qaeda. And what he was saying was that there are children not yet born in Ireland who will hate the British because of what the British did to their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers. You know? So it worked in a sense. You know, he didn't get a chance to kill anybody else. But it was also completely disastrous.
I'm deeply interested in everything that's been said, and I wanted to relate something rang very strongly inside me when Claire showed us the picture of torture from the Spanish Inquisition. Now, that has been used terrifically in English history as anti-Catholic propaganda. What I was wondering is whether there's something almost in the historical psyche of the British people that we are nice guys. We have a reputation of tolerance, of treating people who disagree with us reasonably well. So that there's a huge resistance to thinking we can behave like anybody else. Now, one of the things that immediately I responded to, which I learned about when I was quite young, brought up as a Catholic, was the Queen Elizabeth's reign, until our own day as good priests, not only carried out the most appalling forms of religious persecution under the name of Jesus, but the sophisticated uses of espionage, England became a police state, and that she had the most effective form of espionage, which was used directly by the British Army. Now, this is what English people have done, and therefore we should not be surprised that we are in it up to our necks now. And what I was wondering is, this may seem very fascinating, there is, I believe, quite a lot of, in Wilson's educational courses out there about citizenship, about all these kind of things, whether we could perhaps have a movement which allowed people to re-look at history and not put us on one side as good guys in that sense, but that we are, like, in a sense, it's attacking our humanity, because we are like other human beings. And because we've been made extremely flattered by the terrorist threat, haven't we? And also because of what we've heard so much about, our relationship with the United States over the last few years, is that we've been deeply influenced by their fear and their response to fear. So I was wondering whether, at least as a long-term thing, one of the campaigns could be education, with bringing in this aspect of our own history. Also, I'm very interested, as one more point, this business of, does torture work, in a sense. In a sense, I suppose, it does up to a point, because in fact the Catholic population of England, after Queen Elizabeth's reign, particularly after Nightfalls, was reduced to a few thousand by the 18th century. But then there was a revival in the 19th century. So, up to a point, it does, doesn't it, at one level. But I think what you have said about the hatred, say, of children yet unborn in Ireland, because of what was done to their grandfathers, is what we should remember.
Somebody else, I think there might be a question. Yes. You and then him, yes.
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm involved with the Medical Foundation for the Care of Victims of Torture. And most, I think, of the clients come from Turkey, which is a NATO member, and places like Congo. But obviously, it does help if there are good guys, otherwise they can get it does it. But one of the things I know the Medical Foundation does do is quite often in court cases and applications for asylum to provide the court with detailed medical evidence that somebody really has been tortured, and they're not just making it up in order to be able to claim asylum. Now, presumably in a number of these cases which you've been discussing, you've been acquiring medical evidence which have been examined by doctors and other doctors' experience of Medical Foundation to bear out their terms. Because undoubtedly it has happened, but on the other hand, that it maybe is related to the number of people who claim they have been tortured. Obviously, cases of Medical Foundation for the care of victims of torture takes up people who we are convinced really have been tortured and therefore are deserving of help. Now, have you been involved in that